Recording. I'm Angie Merle, the Director of Student Engagement, and we have with us 4 amazing apprentices. I have, just like I had said when we talked to some of our corporate partners a little while ago today, it is my distinct honor and privilege to work with these young adults. They are all amazing. Hopefully you will see and hear that as they speak to you. They are highly skilled individuals and are doing some amazing things and are going to continue to do that. What we're going to do is I'm going to start asking them some questions. These are typical questions that we get a lot when we do apprentice panels. And the reason we do these is we really believe that Apprentice University, that the best people to tell other people who are interested about what it is like to be in Apprentice University as an apprentice is the apprentices themselves. These are the guys and girls who are doing this program. And so we want them to be open about what it's like for all of you who are interested. Okay, so the first thing I'll just tell you is the 4 people that we have with us today are Elise Payton, we have Faith Merle, Jackson Clanton, and Caleb Todd. And I'm going to go ahead and you guys, I'm going to pose, at least I'm going to mute you for a moment. Jackson, I'm going to mute you. I'm going to pose a kind of series of questions to you at first and have you answer groups of questions, and I'll call on you for this one. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to, again, just tell us your name again after I introduced you. Tell us how long you have been at Apprentice University in your capacity. What first piqued your interest in becoming an apprentice at Apprentice University, and then where you are just right now in your path as an apprentice. Okay, so I think, Faith, what we'll do is we'll start with you.
So right now as an apprentice, I'm almost at my 2-year mark. I actually started back when we first launched Jumpstart and the live classes, so I've been part of AU for over 4 years now, I believe. Oh, dang, I made myself remember the questions and now I forgot all of them. So what's the second one?
So what piqued so you started as a high school student. What piqued your interest to become an apprentice to begin with?
So I decided to become an apprentice mostly because I didn't want to go to college. I wasn't interested in going to college. I'm very much an introvert, so I wasn't interested at all in the social aspect of college. And when I looked at degrees and stuff like that, I just couldn't find anything that really interested me or that was practical in the long run. I couldn't see myself in any of those careers. So AU just provided a different way for me to branch out and explore careers that I didn't even know existed and get some skills and kind of figure out where I actually wanted to go with my life. And then I think the last one is like where I am as accomplished so I'm like I said, I'm almost at my 2-year mark. So I am now, gosh, can I remember? Am I an accomplished apprentice? I should know this.
Yes, you're an accomplished apprentice.
Okay.
Maybe how many apprenticeships have you had?
Okay. So I'm on my 5th apprenticeship currently.
Okay. There you go. Hey, Caleb, we'll go over to you real quickly.
Sweet. Well, again, I'm Caleb Todd. What initially attracted me to Apprentice University is actually quite similar to Faith's. I had no interest in going to a traditional college. I just didn't see any worth in it. And then one summer afternoon, after the Indiana Homeschool Convention, my parents came to me with a flyer for AU, and I'm like, yeah, seems like it's worth it. Why not? Let's go for it. I'm about 2 years in as an apprentice, and then I had 1 year before that as a Jumpstart student. I'm in my 4th apprenticeship at Helmer Scientific. I think that's all the questions.
Excellent. Elise?
I am Elise Payton, and I've been involved with AU for almost 2 years. I started out in the Jumpstart program during my senior year of high school, and then I onboarded as an apprentice last August. And currently I am on my 3rd apprenticeship at Truth at Work.
I'm Jackson Clanton. Today is actually my 2-year anniversary of being an apprentice. My first day in an apprenticeship was exactly 2 years ago today at MPI Corp. And today I'm on my 5th apprenticeship. What initially piqued my interest in AU, it was a combination of things. One, I've known the Merle family my entire life. And so when I was approached with the possibility of Apprentice University, it definitely grabbed my attention because I didn't want another 4 years of normal collegiate type studies. So that's what piqued my interest in AU.
And Jackson, just so that you know, a couple of our guests in here right now had the privilege of hearing from Mark McDonald at MPI Corp just a while ago, right? And so Jackson was an apprentice with under Mark and some other people at MPI. So those of you that were in there, if you have any specific questions for Jackson after you've heard from Mark McDonald, feel free to ask him because he was one of the many that have gone to MPI. Now let me turn and kind of say, if you did you have any doubts about going into the apprentice program? And if so, what changed your mind? At least we'll just go ahead and start with you, and then we'll go.
Okay, so I did have a couple doubts at first. So after I graduated from high school last year, I wasn't sure what the fall would look like for me. I wanted to continue in the Jumpstart program because I loved the classes I had the previous year, but I wasn't a huge fan of becoming an apprentice yet, but I would possibly reconsider the next year. And I realized that the biggest thing that made me think that I didn't want to was the fact that I wouldn't be good enough for the program. And as I look back, I realized that that was not true. And here I am on my 3rd apprenticeship. So I know, yeah.
I will tell you all that we actually had a totally different panel last week for other students, and Elise, just so that you know, you're not alone. Several of them said the exact same thing as you. So, and I was just told, I was just texted by Faith that she believes we just lost power and all service at our house where she is. So, okay, Jackson, how about you?
Yeah, so when I was joining on as an apprentice a couple of years ago, I think kind of the biggest doubt was just, well, what if I don't have a college degree? And, I have different family members. I had my grandpa actually doesn't have a college degree. And at one point in his career, even after 20 years of experience, he wasn't able to find a job for a little while because he didn't have a degree. So that was a concern, but just as I've continued through the program, all of my mentors have over and over again just been talking about the importance of the experience, not a degree. And in fact, during my time at Swan Software Solutions, I was going to a ton of networking events, and the number one topic was how to attract top talent. And the almost unanimous consensus wasn't how do we find the right people with degrees. It was, we just need people who have the skills that we need and it's even gotten to the point where they're just begging for people willing to learn. They're willing to learn. They'll even teach them skills with a lot of companies. So that's kind of what cured that doubt.
Excellent. And I will tell you, Mark spoke a lot about that actually in his own experience as well. So maybe someone will ask you about that. Caleb.
Yeah, I think for me, the two largest doubts when it came to becoming an apprentice were, was I capable? Because the only real work experience I had up until that point was at a local Pizza King, and the fact that I genuinely disdained most of high school didn't help that confidence. And then the other one was just location, because I live about 2.5 hours away from all of the apprenticeships. So it's like, well, I got to find a place to stay, and that's not easy. But, in the past 2 years or so, both of those have been worked on and addressed by the Lord and by some friends. So
Okay, I'm gonna jump to. I'm gonna skip over my next questions and ask you guys something else here. Is because all of you have different experiences, right? We'll take this next question not as of the last 2 or 3 weeks, right? Because obviously, what your day looks like now is quite different than what it looked like 3 weeks ago. I will say that all three, and even Faith, if she can come back on, were actually very highly skilled with using online applications through Apprentice University, and were able to, without a trip of any kind, immediately go remote for our corporate partners. And so they've all been working remotely without any problems. So when I ask you this next question, it's based on not being in a pandemic situation, okay? So what does your typical day and week look like as an apprentice, including, right, when we say the week, what does it look like with your classes and everything else that you do? And when we say Apprentice University is a very difficult path to take for a young person, what would you say to that based on your experiences and what your time looks like and so forth? Caleb, we'll go ahead and start with you for this one.
yeah. So before all of this coronavirus stuff started, I just started at Helmer Scientific, so it's get up at about 6, get ready, get to the office by 8, and be there until 4 or 5, depending on the length of my lunch break. Then get home, depending on my workload for the week, do some classes or whatnot. I also help out with Jackson Clanton's student-led business RLA, so that'll take up an evening or two.
Yeah, so just real quick on the note of converting to the virtual workspace, part of the unique experience at AU is the focus on knowing all of the power skills. And so being able to use all of those online applications makes us as apprentices very transferable, to the point that my mentor is actually wanting me to train our whole team on how to use Microsoft Teams well. And I'm actually giving a presentation to our alumni class here at the end of April on how to use Zoom effectively for meetings. So that's a skill I never would have had probably if it weren't for Apprentice University. And
Yeah.
now I forgot the question.
In just 1 second, I wanted to add something. I forgot about what does it mean that it's hard, real quick. For that one, it's that I feel like hard might be the wrong word for it, just in my opinion, because it's like that seems a bit daunting. But there's real responsibilities with what you're doing. You can't slack off on your work or in your classes. You're expected to engage in both areas pretty consistently and with a fair amount of effort. So I wouldn't want to make it seem imposing with the word hard, but it'll challenge you, and I think it's incredibly beneficial. It'll push you to to be something you hadn't had to be before.
To really just build off of what Caleb was saying, it's challenging, but it's accessible in that you've got team of people around you to help you get to those goals. Like you can reach the summit of the mountain of AU, if we will. It's not this roped off, you can't get there, but you're expected to be able to get there. There's a whole team of people around you, from the staff to faculty to your cohorts to just the student body, pushing you and pulling you to get to those goals. But I'll say for me, it was a bit different because at the time of joining an apprentice, I was technically still a senior in high school and finishing up high school. I was also in a full load of classes at AU. And I had 2 months prior, launched my organization, Radiant Life Alliance, and 3 months prior, helped launch Stages Fine Arts Academy. I was also in our busiest time with AU as facilities manager, as we had just done a lot of work in the current space we were at. And over that first summer, we moved locations to the end of the building where we're currently at. So starting off, that was a ridiculous workload. But now, kind of on an average thing, it's apprenticeship. I have classwork in the evenings, working on Radiant Life Alliance in the evenings. But it's a pretty busy workload. Like some days I'm not even done with meetings until 10 o'clock, but that's not necessarily the path most traveled. And you learn time management really fast, which is an incredibly valuable skill.
Excellent. And I'll just jump in before we go to Elise and Faith and say that, Jackson, I'm so glad that you said that about the online platforms and how you're being asked to step up and lead in our corporate partner. I will tell you that throughout the last 2.5, 3 weeks of this, we have heard nothing from our corporate partner mentors except how amazing all of you guys are, and that you are really stepping up. And not only are you guys doing a great job working remotely, but just like you said, Jackson, they're asking you guys to lead other people in how to do this, because you are so adaptable and so agile and so resourceful at all of this. So kudos to all of you for the rave reviews on that. Elise, we'll go ahead and pick up with you.
Okay, so as far as a typical day, I get up by 6, leave the house by 7:15 so I can get to the office by 8, and I do my work, leave by 4, and then in the evenings, it's typically classwork, badge work. I also have a babysitting commitment every other week, and so it kind of just depends. And then as far as the important to know that's the harder path, I would agree with what Caleb and Jackson had to say, but I would also say it's important to come in determined and motivated. Have lots of self-motivation.
Good, excellent. Faith, I think you popped in the middle of this. Thanks for getting back on with us when the power had gone out for you. We had asked what is it before the pandemic, what would a typical day and week look like for you? And why do we often say, and these guys have kind of changed the words, and I love it, say not that it's the harder, but it's the more, I'd like to say, fully responsible type of the amount of responsibility and weight that is placed on you. What is that like, and can you speak to that a bit?
So my typical week prior to working at home, I am very much a morning person, so I would wake up at 5 o'clock just to have some time to myself. I have some more flexible hours with my current apprenticeship at T2 Systems, so I don't actually have to be in the office till around 8:30, which gave me some more time. I was typically leaving around 7:30, 7:45 to get to the office, and then I'm in a project management role there, so my typical week typically consists of a lot of shadowing of the other people in that professional services project management area. I help with a lot of the documentation, keeping projects updated. I'm starting to co-lead some projects as well. Eventually, hopefully after all of this is over and we get back to the office, I'll start leading some of my own projects for the rest of my apprenticeship. So I'm in the office 8:30 to 5:30, Monday through Thursday. Classes on. So the harder path, for me, it wasn't necessarily, I was used to, throughout high school, having a really heavy workload because I did a lot of dual enrollment and some other extra. I was just used to the go part of it. The hardest part for AU transitioning into an apprenticeship was the social aspect and allowing myself to embrace new opportunities and to meet people and to people. I kind of came in with the perspective that these people while we call them mentors, they were actually my instructors, and I expected them, give me the assignment, give me the criteria, let me finish it on my own time, I'll bring it to you when I'm ready, and then you'll give me your grade and we're done. I'll get the badge, I'll walk out, it's fine. And as soon as I got into my first full-time actual in the office apprenticeship, that was not what they expected. They were a much more loose company. Everyone was engaging, and I was not used to that. So that first apprenticeship was really rough. But the longer I've gone, the more I've transitioned to actually, it's a workspace. These are my coworkers, and I'm another employee, even though I have the title apprentice.
That's actually a great point to bring up, Faith, that I was going to address with you guys is oftentimes we hear, oh, I'll just go get an internship, or how internships differ than apprenticeships, and what's it like to be mentored by people, and what does that mean that your mentors speak into your continuation through the program and beyond. I was just talking to one of our corporate partners today who was just on the phone yesterday in a coffee date with one of our graduated apprentices who he had apprenticed a year and a half ago before with him. So Faith, you want to go ahead and speak into that? How are you treated? Are you looked upon as less than in your apprenticeships, or how do you feel when you're there in our corporate partners? So we'll start with you, Faith, and we'll go down.
It's definitely not an attitude of less than. Our mentors know that we're coming in with a skill level that's not necessarily on par with everyone else in the office, but we're also not just skillless, right? And they're there to coach us along and give us more skills, and also to help us be able to contribute as early as possible. There's been countless conversations where it's been forced upon me to solve the problem, to go talk to the people I need to talk to. It's really very much of, like I said, you're treated as another employee and you have your realm of responsibilities. And in these past 2 apprenticeships specifically, it's my mentor knows what my responsibility is. So if I have something in that realm that I need to fix, they leave it to me to solve that problem. If I need to come to them, it's because I couldn't manage whatever that was, which doesn't often happen.
And for this, I'll just let you guys pop in and out now. Whoever wants to say something, go right ahead.
Yeah, on that note, I would say it's kind of different as you progress through the program. I wouldn't say any of my corporate partners that I worked with ever had an attitude of, looking down on, no, you're just an apprentice, you're completely incompetent in any sort of way. But the respect that I can get in the workplace has grown and grown to where it was, you're part of the team, our staff meetings, interacting, we're confident giving you projects, to now where I'm at True U. I have team members coming to me saying, we have no idea where we'd be without you. You're an invaluable member of our team. And so that's really cool to kind of see that progression and know that I'm adding value. I'm not even just part of a team, but I'm an important part of the team. Like, in my case, everybody else on that team is important too. But
Elisa, Caleb, you have anything to speak on differently about that, or thoughts?
I think even to the benefit of an apprentice role, several of the mentors personally invest in that opportunity to, guide these young people. I can think specifically of my first mentor, Matt Maudlin at Memo Marketing Group, and my current mentor at Helmer, Wendy Swanson, who are very particularly investing in this opportunity to grow not only just a talent, but somebody. And it's like, I think that's something that is hard to come by in the world.
Wonderful. Elise, anything to tack on, or?
I mean, I would agree with everything that's been said, and also to add, you can definitely tell that they want to help you learn and grow through the work that you do during your time there.
Excellent. Do we have any questions from any of our guests yet? If I certainly I can go on and direct some of these, but if you have questions as our guests, we would sure love to field those if you have any. Okay. One of the questions is, what is the Jumpstart program? And since we have 4 apprentices here who actually went through the Jumpstart program, we've got a lot of knowledge base here. So I'll tell you what, I'll open up to the 4 of you to jump in and talk about Jumpstart and let them understand what that is as a high school
Mhm.
student.
Yeah, the very basics of it is that Monday through Thursday, the apprentices are at their apprenticeships, and Fridays there are a few classes going on. The Jumpstart program, at its simplest, is you take the classes, but you're not in an apprenticeship.
Yeah, so that's the bare bones of it. But since the very first day of classes slash Jumpstart, we've actually developed it a lot. So there are more opportunities for Jumpstarts. A lot of them can participate in the student-led businesses. They might get like mini apprenticeships, or for many of us too who started in Jumpstart, we had a lot of work already done on a lot of the foundations badges. So it's not just the classes that you're participating in, it's the larger community and corporate partner network that you start getting access to during your time as a Jumpstart student.
Yeah, so I mean, just in the name of it, Jumpstart, it really helps you get a jump start just into wherever your next step is, but especially if you jump on as an apprentice. So I know for Faith and I, we both technically we jumped into a full apprenticeship before we had technically completed all of the onboarding process and the full onboarding process, because I had a year and a half, she had 2 years of time in that Jumpstart program where we were building those skills and developing those skills to be at a point to go ahead and jump into an apprenticeship. That's one of the biggest values.
Absolutely, and we'll tell you, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but on any given Friday, if you walk in and out of our classes, would you guys agree? You don't know who is an apprentice and who is a high school Jumpstart student. Um, Elise, some of these guys were ahead of you. Did you ever feel like you weren't part of them because you were a high school student? You want to speak to that a little bit?
I mean, I don't have a ton to add, but it's nice being in classes with both other Jumpstart students and apprentices, because you just get more. I feel like the discussion is richer with the mix because they're out experiencing their apprenticeships. And so never really felt like they were above me in any way.
Yeah, and to add to that from the opposite perspective, I've only had one class where I was the only apprentice, and there wasn't a huge difference from the standpoint of it wasn't like this huge drop off. Everyone was still there, showing up, participating, and doing good work in that class.
Excellent. If we didn't answer the complete question, if you want more, continue to ask questions about that. We will field any that you have. I have another question that someone has asked, and it says, "What was your first apprenticeship like? Was it what you expected, and were you surprised by anything?" I know there's several of you who are going, "Oh my goodness, I love talking about this. This is crazy." But so go ahead and just take it over.
Yeah, so my first apprenticeship was with MPI Corp, which you heard from Mr. McDonald a little bit about that earlier. And I went in day one. I had no idea of what I was going to really be doing. I knew I was going to be working on this thing called an ERP system. I didn't really know what that meant. It's an enterprise resource planning software that basically allows the entirety of organizations to in this case, it was particularly in the manufacturing industry, track all of their product, all of their inventory and everything, run accounting, all sorts of stuff that fully integrated our entire company. That we have plants in Mexico and Logansport, Indiana, and Texas, and all over the place. So I was working on a system to work on integrating all of those. And the first day on the job, I remember I asked Justin Moran, who was my first mentor there, and also the first graduate of Apprentice University. He asked me, he was like, "So how well do you know Excel?" And I knew the basics, very basics, and he's like, "Cool, you're going to learn a lot." And so through that apprenticeship, I used a ton of stuff in Excel that I'm still using today in apprenticeships to help with tasks. And it's fun because a lot of times I'm using things that my mentors at these apprenticeships have never heard of, have no idea what's going on. So they're, wait, you can do that? And it's really exciting. But that first apprenticeship was extremely helpful just as a foundation. I was really lucky to be at MPI because my mentors, we actually got a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and went through that with myself, with my 2 mentors and a couple other employees. And we went through that book to help build all of those foundational skills, even just on a soft skill level that you wouldn't get anywhere else.
Yeah, my first apprentice previous stated was at a small marketing firm in Zionsville, Memo Marketing Group, and I went there for the interview, and the first few days utterly terrified of not living up to what I needed to be. But all cheers to my mentor, Mr. Mothman. He's a great guy. Basically, I just sat in on all their meetings, and he told me what I needed to do. And after a couple months, I was doing stuff on my own. I went from like knowing a little bit about web design to designing 3 or 4 websites for their clients. So yeah, it was a pretty big difference going in and coming out.
So I'll go. My first apprenticeship was at AU as Mrs. Merle's assistant, and it was part-time, kind of an apprenticeship to dip my toes into what a full-time apprenticeship would be like. And it was very project-based, so I got experience on lots of different kinds of projects. The biggest one, however, was the apprenticeship experience binder, which I started from scratch and am currently updating it every couple months. And I had to research each corporate partner, write up an overview, and then get all of the apprentices' experience journals to organize in a document and a binder that is currently in the AU office. So it basically showcases AU and what goes on in each apprenticeship.
And I will say, Elise, she will not allow me to remove the project from her, even though she's been on a full other apprenticeship and she's not my assistant anymore, unfortunately. She will not allow me to remove that project from her plate. Faith, you have anything?
So I was actually AU's first apprentice for the university, and I was Mr. Brumberger's assistant, kind of. And so I helped him at that point in time. We were just starting up the Apprentice University Foundation side of AU. So I was helping him with all of that paperwork, creating a couple of the programs that were going to be run through the foundation. Shouted him if he ever had any meetings. So I got to meet a ton of really cool people. And then I also did help my mom too on some smaller projects. I did a lot of updating of the digital badging, and I was able to run our summer retreat that year as well, which is a really fun project.
And just to clarify, Faith, you weren't the first apprentice. You were the first apprentice we were able to bring on and actually work as an apprentice here in Apprentice University.
Right, that's what I was trying to say.
Yes.
It didn't work.
Anybody else have anything about that, or is that a good enough answer, or they can clarify for you? You guys have other questions that you want to shoot out to them at all right at this moment? I'm going to put one with you guys are thinking of, and that's great. I'm going to present another one is, so what are, we talk about the foundational skills, we talk about creative problem solving and critical thinking, and we talk about etiquette and communications. And Jackson, you referred to the power skills, right? Being able to use online platforms and be in spreadsheets and presentations and things like that is what we want to talk more about your individual interests and skills. So hang on with that because I did get two more questions in. So we're going to hang on for that for a moment. And then where it says, what was one of the greatest challenges you had to overcome as an apprentice so far? Wow. This is similar to what they have to present at their promotion days. They have to share what their successes are as well as failures. And this question isn't necessarily about your failure. It's about an overcoming just a challenge. Anybody want to take that?
So mine is more of a daily challenge. I'm going to use this one because it's what I presented in my last promotion, which is, like I mentioned before, in coming in with a perspective that it was more of a school relationship and that I just needed to complete an assignment. One of my struggles is taking initiative on any of my projects or just asking for more work or engaging with people in conversations. And that's something I've really had to work on with every apprenticeship is just one, laying out the expectations between my mentor and myself on what they need to see for them to know I'm engaging and learning and forming relationships and everything. And also for myself, starting to learn in what context do I work best and how do I communicate and those types of things. So it's something that you just have to learn along the way. But it's also something I have to stay conscious of because I can easily slip into, especially in the environment we are now where I am working from home, it's easier to slip into a pattern of just doing things to get by and make up the time, but not necessarily asking for more work or challenging myself to also continue growing in this role.
For me, the largest challenge I've faced up until now, last year from the spring to the late fall, I was quite and it definitely messed with my ability to work. Thankfully, the community here was rather supportive, as were my parents, and through a lot of talking it out, I was able to work through it to one extent or another. I mean, I'm sure we understand not all of that goes away sometimes, but it's like it's something real and something in more like, well, things happen. People don't always think the right ways. So I don't know. I hope that was explanative enough.
I think Caleb, you cut out a lot. I think, is everybody hearing Caleb cut out a lot? Is it just me? Or, okay. So I will just clarify that since you did put it out there, Caleb. Thank you for being so open and sharing. Is that what Caleb said is he went through a period of depression, and the community came alongside him, and so we've loved watching him work through that. And that is, I thank you for sharing, Caleb. That has been wonderful. Jackson, go ahead.
Just a couple things real quick. One of them, I would definitely say one of the biggest challenges is expectations, setting clear expectations, and then meeting those. I'm pretty ambitious, and so I've had to do that very carefully with all my mentors. And sometimes it's my mentors come and say, "Hey, I appreciate the big goals. We're not expecting you to do that." So at Swan, I really wanted to be able to make a sale. Our sales cycle is about 3 to 6 months. So in a 6-month apprenticeship, that's really hard. When they bring on new salespeople, they generally don't expect them to make sales for over 6 months because they are building a network in that industry and building a brand with the company they're working for. And so clarifying that with my mentor, and she told me, look, that would be fantastic, but we're not expecting you to do that, and that's okay. That's not what we're defining as success, a successful apprenticeship with you. And so even on the grand scale of entire apprenticeships, clarifying those expectations, but also in just small projects. One of the biggest learning things for me was a couple months ago, I had a project that I was working on that ended up, a couple things just kind of delayed it and past the original deadline. And then talking with my mentor about that afterwards and reviewing that, she's like, it's fine. It wasn't a critical thing necessarily, but this is a great chance to work on setting the expectations lower and overperforming. And so if you see deadlines that are going to start slipping, make sure you communicate that with plenty of time in advance and everything, and just keep that open line of communication expectations. And so I think that between all of my apprenticeships has just been the most challenging thing in keeping those expectations clear.
I'd say for one of the challenges that I have faced as I started at Truth at Work in January was doing good work, but also figuring out the best way for me to get to know my coworkers better, because we all are there for work, but I also want to get to know all of them. So I think that was the biggest challenge when I started there.
I want to add one more thing too, because I know we answer this question really broadly, but when you're an apprentice, what you'll find out is your worst fear is not having a project. That is super challenging because we have our mentors, we have our coworkers, we have the AU staff to help us actually work through that more technical, hard-skilled side of a project. It's really when it comes to expectations, relationships, and those types of things, that's where a lot of the challenges reside for us. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I don't know where you were coming from with your question. If you were thinking of a specific challenging project, that's not the major area of challenge for most of us.
And I'll just throw this out from last week that a question was presented and they all said, they've learned to one of the scariest things they said is going in and believing I don't have the skills to do this. I'm going to fail because I don't know what I'm doing, because I've never done this kind of XYZ, whatever you want to enter, this project, this skill-based, whatever it is, build a website, do this. And although I'm interested in learning, and so they said that it's once you can get past that idea of, I have nothing to offer, and realizing that actually you've been set up as an apprentice that you do have things to offer, and pretty soon you're going to have a whole lot to offer. Like what Jackson was saying, and they're all saying, is that you start to learn very quickly that you are actually capable of doing a lot at a very young age. You're ready to go. We prepare you for that, and our mentors are great. So I don't know if you guys have anything since I've said that or not. We went over that in a morning session, which you guys will get access to. But yeah, typically it's about 5 or 6 apprenticeships. Everybody is different because as we talked about in another session, everything is so individualized. We have had actually a couple of apprentices who've done 7 apprenticeships just because maybe they had a shorter apprenticeship. Elise herself, I know, is saying she's on her 3rd, but it's going to look different for her because 2 of her first were part-time and then they overlapped. And so it just looks different for everyone. What we're looking for is what our corporate partners said on the last, when we talk about experience, when they are hiring and they're looking for true experience, what they like to see is about 4,000 hours. They like to see those very different experiences that all of our apprentices have had. And that's what Mark McDonald and Justin Clements said on our last gathering together, is that they really like several different experiences when they're looking at our apprentices. Anyone else have any questions? If not, we'll go back to the one that I had started before, which is it is more about those skills. So you all have a variety of interests. You came into Apprentice University. Some of you love to do certain things, and you were really interested in certain things, and those have tweaked and changed, or maybe those are still there and maybe have increased. It's not about you didn't choose Apprentice University because you didn't want to learn. All of you chose because you wanted to exponentially learn in different areas. So what were your interests? What are your interests now? And what are some beyond the skills in our foundational certificate? What are the skills that you individually are really are learning and have you gained to this point? And Elise, I'm going to have you go first because I know you're the first one that's going to have to jump out of here. Okay.
So I would say for me, I'm not really sure what I want to do yet after I graduate, but as far as some interests, I'd say maybe something in administrative assistant realm, or possibly graphic design. I mean, I have recently found out that graphic design is super broad, so I'm trying to look into more of what that looks like and how I might be able to get some experience in that during this program. But I would say those are the top two right now. Was there any more to your question?
Well, you personally, as far as a person, what kind of interests do you have, and what kinds of things have been brought to light for you in Apprentice University that you now have an interest in that maybe you hadn't, and maybe not as far as a career path, just as in a general lifelong learning kind of situation. We started with Elise because she's got to jump out here in the next 5 minutes, but if anybody else wants to jump in and go back and forth, that's fine.
So coming on, as you said, I had a ton of different interests. For me, just because I had a really academic focused high school, I was more on I might be a writer, I might be a speaker, English and literature and history and the humanities. Those were kind of the things that I thought I was interested. I knew for sure what I didn't like was anything technology related. So coming on, I said that I would do marketing because I thought I like to be creative, so that just seemed obvious to me. And that was what my second apprenticeship was in, and I quickly found that I did not like that at all. It was too routine, too scripted, too narrow for me to really enjoy it. And what I actually found that I'm most interested for a professional career is project management. And the more that I would talk to people who were in that field, the more I was surprised just how many of the skills I currently have just kind of seem to fit what a project manager does and the types of skills they need. And so far, the experiences I've had, I've really enjoyed it. I do still struggle sometimes just because as a project manager, you have a skill set that's really transferable, but the key is also, at least for me, I think the key is also enjoying the projects you're working on and you're managing. And that hasn't always been the case for me. But even then, there are different learning opportunities for me to just learn how to manage people, how to manage timelines. And now I'm learning how to manage finances and that side of the project. I think personal interests too, I've developed a lot of these through classes, specifically digital storytelling, and starting to experiment more with videography. This session we have podcasting running, and I love listening to podcasts. I've always wanted to start one. So I've been really enjoying that class, along with also continuing the literary side through a lot of our classes. So they kind of, my hope is once I graduate and everything, all of my interests will kind of combine in this beautiful dream that I have. But right now that's I know this is a side tangent, but that's kind of what I like best about AU too, is just that you have your work that you can pursue interest there, and then you also have classes that you can pursue interest through, so you're never narrowed down to one thing. You can kind of dabble your fingers in a lot of different areas.
As for me, pursuits and interests. Started out with web design and marketing because it's like, oh yeah, that'll be interesting, right? A little bit, but I ultimately got over it. And now I'm doing some data analysis for Helmer, and I'm really excited to see where that'll go, because it's intriguing to hunt down the data and figure out what the story is behind it. But I think the largest interest that I've accumulated during my time at AU is what I'll probably end up pursuing to one extent or another, which is counseling and or psychology. So, I find lectures online and listen to them, and we'll see what I can do afterwards.
Yeah, so just for context, one of the first things we do as an apprentice in our orientation is write out a list of interests. And so I just went ahead and I went and pulled that up, just for context of where I was at the beginning. And before this, I thought, okay, I want to go into business development, but I didn't know what business development was when I was saying that. When I was saying business development, I was thinking, helping businesses become better. I didn't realize that was a sales and prospecting industry is what that actually is. So that I was connected with the vice president of sales at Valve Meter Marketing, who told me a lot about that and helped steer me on a better path in that regard. And that was still as a Jumpstart student. Opportunity I wouldn't have had otherwise, but I had five interests: leadership and team development, ministry, storytelling, entrepreneurship, and sales. And throughout my apprenticeship journey, I've really been able to hone in on those, all five of them. I'd say particularly the top two in leadership and team development. That's my primary job at True U, whether it be helping lead our leader and training class, and helping facilitate those, or there's just a wide variety of things I've done there in that regard. I've written a bunch of content now that I'm working on. I'm putting out a bunch of content for our new portal that we just launched, and so I get to do that, and that's super fun. And the other side of that, that second thing that was ministry, is through my organization, Radiant Life Alliance, that I've been running for 26 months or something like that now. I've been able to do that every step along the way and fulfill that passion and that drive, and I get to take that off into the future. And there's been, the cool thing about that is that also ties in entrepreneurship, and I'm a generalist kind of guy, and so that's the fun part about being an entrepreneur when you're really just starting out, is you wear every hat. If something's got to get done, you look around, and when I started, it was just me. There was no one else to get that stuff done, so it was a lot, and you learn so much so fast, and just an incredible variety of skills. And so I've been able to pursue both my career passions and my personal passions through it.
Elise has to leave us now. So thanks, Elise. Thanks for joining us for the amount of time you can. We're probably going to be a couple more minutes, but be safe out there. Jackson, something that made me think about tagging on to that is so are there, we say that there's nothing, there's no time and there's nothing wasted by being an apprentice university. Do any of you feel like you have acquired any type of skills that are just there for naught, like you won't use skills that you have gained? Anybody want to speak into that?
Yeah, so I have a great story about that, because my first apprenticeship was at MPI in IT. I had no plans on ever being an IT guy. Still don't. But that job there One, a lot of the skills I learned there have helped me kind of in every step along the way. A lot of the companies I worked for were smarter. So to some degree, I became the resident IT guy at a lot of those companies and helping out with little things. At Truth at Work, we actually had a computer. We had a desktop. It was an old desktop running Windows 7 in the conference room that they had stopped using. They had started bringing a laptop to connect to the TV because it had stopped working. It hadn't actually stopped working. It just wasn't connected to the TV anymore. And so like fixing that stuff and just little stuff that it was kind of fun and a fun change of pace for me. But then I got to True U, and that's helped to a degree. But I actually took a primary role in launching our portal, which we launched a month ago, and so I've been the primary help desk guy for that when people are having issues and when people have any kinds of issues. My mentor, it's, hey, Jackson, can you go check this out and fix this? And so that's been kind of a fun thing to do and have that in a role. And it's all kind of built off of that first apprenticeship. A lot of those skills and things I'm using now, right down to just working through a problem with a client and knowing which questions to ask to get the details you need to be able to solve the problem.
Yeah, the closest thing to skills I won't use again that I can think of was during my time at Q Point Robotics, I got to play with some fun toys. Skills I may not need to use again, but they were fun toys. It was an enjoyable experience.
One of the things I thought I would never use again is when I was doing all of the digital badging work when I was apprentice for AU. It was really, really boring at the time, but I'm grateful for that time because I'm better able to explain what badges are to other people, and I now have a process of taking those badges and rewriting them all for my mentors, and and then I actually had a project where I was writing a rubric for something. So they're not necessarily skills I enjoy using, but they've definitely come in helpful in a grander scheme of things of taking something that's more complex, breaking it down, understanding it so that you can then explain it differently to somebody else is just really helpful.
Wonderful. Well, are there any other questions? I'll field any other questions if we have them. If not, again, thank you all for after work coming on here with us. It's so appreciated. You guys are wonderful to work with, such highly skilled, highly talented people. The corporate partners in Apprentice have just been raving over all of you again, like I said. So have a wonderful evening, lovely weekend, and we will see you soon, hopefully in person sometime soon. Bye, everyone.